Greetings and welcome. My name is Jake Rayson. I am a forest gardener and a forest garden designer, and welcome to this week's Forest Garden live stream. And I shall be talking, it's part 2 of the 3-part course, which is the structure. It's all about the structure. So last week I was talking about plan and the design. And this week I'm going to be looking at the structure of the forest garden. There is a short session afterwards, a Zoom session. There will be details. Go to the Twitch chat if you possibly can, if you need to. The details will be there, and I shall post them in. So here we go. I'll post these in now to the chat. So on Twitch chat, Zoom link. You can make a donation. I have various links. NatureWorks, GoFundMe, donations, and a Patreon as well. And the password is design. That's the link. So if you would like to come along to the Zoom session, I shall be talking about the about people's individual forest gardens as well. So, hi Dan, nice to see you on the chat. Alrighty, I haven't done this. Structure. Sorry. Oh, good lord. It's a bit all over the place today. Don't know why that would be. So, sorry. Yeah. No, I just saw some rubbish there, and it was a bit rubbish, but let's just get that going again. Okay, let's get cracking then. Last week, a quick recap. Last week, I did a super fast overview. The whole kind of structure of the course. The format is there's 3 sessions, 3 half-hour sessions. First one's plan. The second one is structure. And the third one is cultivate. So planning is why forest gardening, why it's so important, how to do a survey of your garden, and then looking at design, creating a paper map and creating a CAD map as well. This will, the second part is structure. So I'll be looking at protection, which is windbreaks and structures and paths. And the second part of that is perennial vegetables, and I explain why I consider that part of the structure phase of the forest garden. And the third part is the canopy layout, getting the canopy trees put in. And then the final half-hour session is cultivate. So this is like the next session. This is about preparing the ground, how to clear the ground, planting shrubs, and putting in a living ground cover, and the process for that. And I like to do it this way. I like to divide it up into 3 different stages. So you do the first stage, maintain everything, do the first stage, plan the forest garden. You start off by creating the structure of the garden, and then area by area you cultivate each particular area. So you get the structure in, windbreaks and canopy layer, and then over a period of time, whatever time you can manage, you cultivate area by area. And I found that this is the most efficient way for me to approach creating a forest garden, rather than trying to do everything all at the same time. So plan, structure, cultivate. So when I get to do this properly, this will be like a monthly session, and I will almost definitely do it as an evening session. So it'll be 3 evenings in a month. So I'm not sure which day it will be. Be Monday evening, and it will be from 7 till 8 or something like that, 7 till 9. And the reason for doing, and then that so other people can open up the forest gardening course to other people as well. But this is an experiment with the format, and so it's not particularly well advertised or anything, but that's absolutely fine. This is as much about practice for me. Cool. So today we're doing structure, plan, structure, cultivate, and I will really want to emphasize that in a forest garden, any garden is an ongoing process. It's not completed. It's it's an engagement with the land. You don't just kind of do it and then, oh, that's it, that's done, let's step back. You're constantly involved with it. And it's a spiral as well. So you're improving the detail. You do the broad structure first of all, and in a great sweep, and then you kind of come into particular areas and do them, and then but you never finish, which is a nice thing. You're constantly improving and tweaking, and you're looking at your setup and where things are. And it's an iterative design spiral. And this actually comes from a software development, funnily enough, but the whole idea that you design, build, and evaluate, you do your plan, you put in, you create the structure, and then you look at what you've done, and then you improve it, and then you just kind of improve, and hopefully it's an improvement, and it gets less work to do, and you fine tuning it. So it's a spiral process. I am just going to copy that. Actually, I need a copy of that over here. Here we go. There is a fantastic book called How Buildings Learn, which I recommend to all, pretty much anybody, to be honest. But it's really good if you're interested in design and the use of a space. It is a fantastic book. So Stuart Brand, How Buildings Learn. There is a YouTube series. It's a BBC series, and it's been put up on YouTube for free, so you can watch the series as well. And the book is brilliant if you can get hold of it. It's out of print. If you can get hold of it, it is really, really interesting because it's about the use of space. So let's move on to protect. So the kind of key thing is the one thing that you can do to improve your plants in a forest garden. The one thing you can do is to protect those plants, and the key thing to protect them from is wind. So wind protection is the first, foremost important thing to protect your plants from. I have an Italian alder in a forest garden, and I planted it 5-6 years ago, and it died after a couple of years. Did really badly. Died after a couple of years. Planted another one, that died. Really exposed position. There's a few about 10 meters away or so. There's another Italian alder which is now about 8 meters tall. I'm onto the third Italian alder in that spot. And I put this last year I put in a dead hedge to protect it, and it's doing absolutely fine. It's doing really, really well. So it does make the biggest difference. Protecting from the wind is the biggest thing that you can do. You might want to rush in and just plant trees, but honestly, if you can establish dead hedges and windbreak hedges, then it will just improve the growth of your trees. So protection, absolutely utmost. There's a windbreak. So ultimately what you want to do, this is Martin Crawford's second site, where he's got his nursery and his forest garden greenhouse thing, and it's a Rosa rugosa hedge, and that's what you're aiming for, is a windbreak, a living windbreak hedge is ideally what you want to have. And you always plant, and this goes for all plants, pretty much all plants, you plant for the final size. So work out the final size and put the hedge in for that final size. What this means is that you don't have to keep on cutting the hedge. It'll be kind of loose, I think the term is, and not particularly neat and tidy, but it will be loads less maintenance. A dead hedge, I'm sure people, I love dead hedges. A dead hedge is just a pile of branches in front of a specific tree, or a line of them. I've come up with 3 different forms of dead hedge. So in this picture here, this is like a box dead hedge. So you've got 2 posts. Let me zoom in, I can show you. You've got 2 posts on either side, and you fill the gap in between with old branches and stuff, and that's fantastic for getting rid of bramble, docks, real kind of bindweed. It just dries out on there and it decomposes really slowly, and you can next year you can add more material in, so it takes up a lot of material and it provides protection for the plant behind it. And the other one is a woven dead hedge. I see I'm getting names: box dead hedge, a woven dead hedge, which is a set of poles, and you kind of very crudely weave long branches between them and stack them up. Not as thick, but is kind of takes up less material, which is actually kind of quite handy if you haven't got so much material to use. And then the final one is a fence dead hedge, where you use an existing fence and you're putting you put posts in behind the fence, and then you fill up the gap between the fence and the posts. So those are my 3 types of dead hedge, and they are fantastic. But the idea is always to have a living hedge, and then what I would do is put a dead hedge in first of all, and then put a living hedge in front of the dead hedge. So you can, or put the dead hedge behind the living hedge. But this provides the living hedge with some protection, but it gets your protection in for the plant straight away as well. So over in the nuttery, which is a couple of acres over there, it's quite a steep slope, and in front of every tree I have put a dead hedge, a box dead hedge, and they're brilliant. They're doing really, really well, and it's fantastic because you can also see where the trees are as well. When the trees are small, you don't know where they are. You kind of can lose track of them. So that has worked really, really well. Now, the other thing that you can do is put nurse trees. I've done this in a couple of places. A nurse tree is a plant which just goes in. It's a plant which goes in front of the tree that you planted, and then you cut it down when the tree is protected enough. You cut down the plant in front. The one I found which works really well is Scotch broom, because it's kind of easy to manage and easy to take out. And I have put dogwood in as well, but that seems to be getting a bit out of hand. And then don't forget as well that there are the structures that you use as a windbreak. You can also a polytunnel and a greenhouse and a potting shed and a cold frame will all fit into this as well, because not only do they kind of trap the heat, they protect from the wind. So I've got luckily got we've got a large polytunnel here, and I'm planting an apricot in winter. I'm planting an apricot tree in the polytunnel on a dwarfing rootstock, and it's because it is offered so much protection. I also have some Chilean guava in there, a couple of Chilean guava plants there, which also like protection. So structures also protect. So do bear that in mind. And cold frame, I still haven't made my own cold frames, but cold frames are brilliant as well, because when you're starting plants out, you put them onto to get them going. You can use a heated propagation bed or in a windowsill. But when you put them outside, you don't just want to chuck them straight out to the sun, full sun, on the wind. They'll get hammered. So you really would need to put them into a cold frame, so like a sheltered spot with the lid, not too wet, not too dry, and pamper them a little bit and gradually accustom the plants to being outside. The key thing for a windbreak is how high they are. The formula is the height of the windbreak protects 8 times the length. So if you have a 2 meter high windbreak, it will protect for 16 meters. So 2 meters high protects 60 meters long. And then you can either have, so if you've got a 32 meter wide garden, you can either have a 4 meter high windbreak, and that will protect for 32 meters, or you can have a 2 meter high windbreak and then have another windbreak, and that'll protect which will protect for 16 meters, and that'll protect for another 16 meters. So you can have a sequence of windbreaks. And the reason for doing this is that you might not want to have a 4 meter high windbreak because you're on the southern border of the land, and that will cast too much shadow. So you have a sequence of 2 meter windbreaks. Yeah, does that make sense? So you don't have to have one big one. You can have 2 little ones and provide the same protection. And if you do have the space, I kind of really recommend having a double thickness windbreak as well, because you kind of stagger them, plant them in a zigzag about a meter or so apart, and that kind of beefs up the protection that you get. It does use up the space in your land, but that also does give you more protection as well, so the plants that you do have are better protected. And aspect dictates height. A fantastic app on the old mobile phone called Sun Surveyor, and it it shows you the position of the sun in the sky, and which is useful on a cloudy day, but also it's really useful. It can show you the position at different times of the year as well. And this way you can say, if I put in a hedge, a windbreak hedge here of 4 meters high, and it's facing south, oh, that will shade out this much of the garden. You go, well, actually, maybe on a southern boundary, I might just want to put a 2 meter hedge and then put another one a bit further back. Yep. So it's a good way of seeing how much shade will be cast and at what time of year as well. So generally, you put your taller hedges at the north and the east. Eastern sunlight is not as valuable as western sunlight, because in the afternoon the air's had a chance to warm up, and the plants can photosynthesize more readily as a stoma. Is that what they're called? Or open, the little kind of pory things for the diffusion of the gases. So western sunlight is generally more valuable. And also check the prevailing wind. Here the prevailing wind is southwesterly, straight up the valley. But it depends upon where you are in the world as to where the prevailing wind is. And what you do want to do as well is to have a what you do want to have is to have a not have any gaps in the windbreak too. So if you've got a gap, either vertical profile is a better protection. So the profile is, if you have a high profile like that and then the garden, that provides better protection rather than having it sloped, because the sloped allows the wind to come in. So you're much better to have a vertical profile, but it might not fit into the landscape as well. So there's some other considerations in there. And if you've got a gap when you have a gap in the hedge, you have a what's called a baffle or an island gap. So you have a gap in the hedge and you just have a little row in front of it, and that provides you have to go round and through the gap. You can have a staggered gap, as in the picture here. So it's like that. So you kind of walk around, or an angle gap if space is short. So it's like you've got a hedge, but you just have the path goes in at an angle, so the wind doesn't go straight through. So those are kind of some tips for windbreaks. In terms of species, windbreaks is one of those things I think that it's really good to look at the what's growing naturally. So I always propose that people plant native where possible to support as much wildlife as possible, because native plants are a food source for insects, and insects are the foundation of the food web. So always plant native plants where possible. So depending upon where you are in the world, can determine which plants you use as windbreak. If you're in China, use autumn olive. Depends whereabouts in China, obviously, because it's a massive country. But use the native species wherever you are. In the UK, I do use non-native species, but generally as part of a mix. So in the UK, I like using a lot of Guelder Rose, Viburnum opulus, which is a lovely, beautiful, beautiful plant, and sea buckthorn, which is a native. Suckers quite a lot, thorny. Both grow to about 5-6 meters. And then there's a European barberry, grows to 2-3 meters, Berberis vulgaris, and there's willows as well. The one I've just been using, Salix viminalis, Bowles hybrid. So that's quite a bit taller. So there's quite a lot. There's quite a few options. And these are just the ones off the top of my head. So I used Ligustrum vulgare. How's it called? Wild privet. So native privet. So just have a look. See what native plants you have, how tall they grow, and what their habit is, and what conditions they like, and then that can inform your choice for the plants for the windbreak. So see what grows natively. If you're in North America, you've got Amelanchias. You've got so many Amelanchias, Juneberries, Amelanchier canadensis. But there's just lots and lots of different ones. And also be careful as well which plant you're using. In the UK, I've used autumn olive a fair bit here for a windbreak. That's fine. But in parts of Australia and parts of America, it's considered an invasive species. So do be careful what you're planting, where you're planting. If it has a potential to be invasive, then don't use it. Don't really bother about it. Now, some people say as well, you can use your windbreak for a variety of different purposes. So here, if you can, well, to get the windbreak plants cheap, you normally do them bare root. You buy them bare root in winter, and they're much cheaper, and that's great. But they're not named varieties, so that means that they won't fruit as well. So you can propagate your own windbreak plants. If you've got the time and the space to do that, that can work out. To be honest, it's just they're so relatively so cheap for what they are. I find it easier a lot of the time to buy them in. But I have been taking cuttings from from sea buckthorn, a named variety, and also from autumn olive, and then I've been using those in windbreaks dotted about, and because they fruit better, I'll get some crop from the hedge, but it's not my main concern. It's only if I've got the time and the space to do it. Okay. So on to the veg. Excuse me. Perennial veg. Crikey, the time is zooming past. I really think that the perennial vegetables are that there is a structural element, and the reason I kind of put it in at this point is if I'd started the forest garden process again, I would have done things very differently, obviously, and I would have created the structures, and as part of the structures, I would have put productive perennial vegetable beds near the house early on, and to get the perennial vegetables going. Now, there's a couple of reasons for doing this. Firstly, perennial vegetables, like all kind of perennial plants, take a while to get established. So the quicker you get them established, the quicker you get a harvest from them. And the second point is that because it's still perennial vegetables are still quite a niche thing, that they're kind of hard to get hold of, and you actually have to grow a lot of your own stock. I've put out some potato onions. I bought them from Alison Tyndale at Backyard Larder, and I've got half a dozen, and I planted them out last year, and now I've got 40 or 50 of them, and I've planted all them out. I'm just going to start eating them this season, but still putting aside a lot for next year. And you slowly have to build up your own stock. Same thing with the leeks. I've got some perennial leeks that I'm planting out this year, and yeah, I probably won't eat them at all this year, and just divide them and plant them out again next year. So that's two reasons why to get started with perennial vegetables as a structural element. Get them cracking first of all. So, the reasons for growing perennial vegetables is because they are more nutritious, because the root systems are established, and they have been shown to be way more nutritious. But for me, the most important thing is they are low maintenance. I've kind of got a lot of other things going on. I don't really have the time for annuals, and I did try for a few years. I have tried, and I still grow the tomatoes and cucumbers and things, but my heart is not in it. And there's people who do, and that's brilliant, but I just can't. It's not my thing, so I don't really do it. But I think low maintenance, get a plant in the ground, and then you can harvest it, and it's low maintenance, and that's the kind of vegetable that I want. Where to put the perennial vegetables is near the kitchen, so this kind of informs the design process. So when you're designing your perennial vegetable beds, put them near the kitchen. Now, note about the kind of terminology for saying this is a perennial vegetable bed and this is for perennial vegetables. A forest garden doesn't really kind of work like that. Like you can have a mixture of things. You can have a polyculture. They don't all have to be vegetables. You can have a variety of different other things going on. So you can have a perennial vegetable bed and it's got a dwarf apple tree in it, or it's got some wildflowers in it. It doesn't really matter. You can mix and match. but it's more to get the sense of, to get things going, that when you're designing it with cropping in mind. The further away you go from the house, the less kind of like, you don't want to be kind of going out there all the time for picking spinach, for example. You don't want to go to the far end of the garden to get a spinach plant. So you kind of put a spinach type plant nearer the house. That's the idea behind it. So near the kitchen when you're designing your beds. And I've done very kind of formal, normal beds. They're 3 meters long and 1.5 meters wide, which is too wide. And I did raised beds. You don't need to have raised beds. You can have just beds with paths around them. I've done them very formally, 6 raised beds, all kind of laid out in a row. They don't have to be, but what I would say is do make a bed, a narrow bed, 1.2 meters wide, so that you can reach over, or whatever kind of is comfortable for you, so that you can reach the vegetables and you can access it from more than one side. Yeah, so I think that's kind of important, is just to put paths in there. And I've started off with the raised beds and put down woven plastic sheet mulch. I've taken out the raised beds, and I've taken out the plastic sheet mulch because it doesn't do anything. Grass grows over it, and then you end up with grass and plastic sheet mulch. So what's the point? So instead, I'm getting rid of grass, and I've put down wood chip paths as well. So I've got beds which are now I've made them a bit narrower. They're 1.2 meters wide, and I've got wood chip paths around them. And then I'm also starting to put in like fruit bushes, and I have put in a couple of dwarf apple trees as well here and there. So it's kind of much more relaxed perennial vegetable area, but they still are kind of quite well defined bits there. A tip for wood chip paths is that you can use a hoe to maintain them, to weed them. You can use a hoe to get rid of all the if you've got stuff growing up there that you don't want, use a hoe to get rid of them. And that's an easy way of doing it, and it keeps the wood chip all loose as well, so it doesn't provide a growing medium. So you don't actually have to use that much more material to keep topping them up. I thought it was going to be tons and tons, but actually I think we should be all right. And then I am growing the perennial vegetable beds. I'm treating them like any other part of the forest garden. I am putting in suitable ground cover. So I have some alliums, and then what have I got in there? Oh, potato onions, for example. I will grow either like Nepalese raspberry or Taiwanese raspberry, and these will provide a low ground cover that the alliums can come through. If you put vinca in, we've got some vinca minor, which is lesser periwinkle, a ground cover in a different part of the garden, and it is amazing. It's grown. Honestly, it's grown up. There's some bramble trying to get through, and it's grown up the bramble, and it's about 60-70 centimeters high. It's quite incredible. But that'll be too much for alliums to grow through because it's a thick mat. So you want something which is you got to get the right ground cover for the right crop. And I've got other kind of crops going. I've got other kind of ground covers going on as well for Jerusalem artichoke, which is a bit more robust. So I've got some wild strawberry grown there, green strawberry grown with the Jerusalem artichoke, and I'll just mix and match and try out different ground covers. One I am very interested in for the polytunnel, so I want to get a perennial polytunnel going as well. I want to use a creeping thyme, which is a UK native, and that will just that's kind of low, but that's kind of like can deal with the hot and dry conditions as well. So that's kind of quite exciting. So experimenting with different ground covers for different crops and different situations. And I'll come on to this in the next session, but the idea of using when you set up the beds as well, you're using a bark mulch, put your perennial vegetables in, and then put your ground cover in, and then I'm using a temporary ground cover as well. So I'm using white mustard, which is an annual, provide a bit of cover for the ground cover, the perennial ground cover to get established, and then that'll die back, and everything hopefully will all be kind of functioning as a unit. So it's treated very much like other parts of the forest garden, apart from it's narrower and the access is better. You can also feed and water just because they're perennial vegetables doesn't mean you can't feed and water them. Because if you feed and water the plants, you'll get a better crop as well. So I'm putting in more comfrey around the place and using chop and drop mulch around my perennial vegetables. And I've also I've boosted them with compost, and I'll water the plants. I've got this near a hose, so I will water the plants if it's a very dry spell, just to give them get them a good start. So you still can do that. What you can do as well is what I would say, which species. I've made a table which is on the link here, which is perennial vegetables, and it just gives. I've done this a while back, but just gives you an idea of what the alternatives are to your standard annual vegetables. But I think use it as a basis, but go and experiment and try things out, and get some kind of quantity of them, grow them. Right then, so experiment with alternatives. And then my top 10 perennial veg, I put this in here just really as a kind of reference link. I won't spend much time doing it because we're running out of time. Caucasian spinach, good for a shady spot. Likes damper conditions, grows to about 2-3 meters tall, herbaceous perennial. Daylilies, full sun, you can eat the flower, you eat the flower buds. Welsh onion, you can either treat it like spring onion and also like chives. Garden sorrel for salads, it's kind of lemony tasting leaves. Good King Henry, spinach plant. Perennial kale, it's a kind of kale cabbage plant. Lots of different types actually, and you can also grow a lot of kale as perennial kale too. So there's quite a few different varieties and species to try out, and different flavours too. Perennial leek, which is a cross with a this is from Backyard Larder. I can't remember. It's more leeky tasting than garlicky tasting. Babington's leek is a bit more garlicky apparently. Siberian purslane, good ground cover, earthy beetrooty type leaves. Turkish rocket, some people hate it, say it smells of dead rotting meat. I think it tastes lovely. And you eat the flower shoots. You can eat the leaves cooked generally, and you can eat these flower shoots steamed, and I think they've got a lovely complex taste. Wild garlic can get a bit out of hand, but all just gone over early on in the year. Beautiful white flowers, and you can use them. You cook them very, very short amount of time to keep the flavour. So that's like top 10 perennial veg. Plenty more out there, and also links to perennial vegetables as well. So a couple of different places that you can get perennial vegetables. Backyard Larder, this is for the UK, I'm afraid. I don't know about the rest of the world. Backyard Larder and Incredible Vegetables. And then there's a Facebook. Stephen Barstow has a webpage called Edimentals, which is Edible Ornamentals. Really, really good Facebook page too. Alan Carter up in Scotland's got plums and pig nuts. I haven't really explored that very much, but there's a lot of information about different recipes too, which would be great to have a look at. And then Plants for a Future, the kind of online database. This has a whole load of perennial vegetables there. So that should get you going. That should get you sorted out for a lot of things. Canopy Layout, just in the next kind of 5 minutes. So the canopy layer. So you've got your you've put in your. I might rejig this a little bit. You've got your windbreaks in, and then what I would actually say is, I'm going to make a note of this, is to put in your paths and your structure, your paths and the areas, and divide up the areas into different. To divide up your land, which is a part of the design stage as well, but to divide up your land into different areas, and they're divided by paths. So paths, not only are paths access, paths are also a tool for dividing the land. So you can get somewhere, but it's kind of makes it easier to say, that's this bit, that's perennial vegetables, that's more kind of fruit bushes or whatever it is, and there's a path that goes between. And this makes it easier for kind of working out in your head what needs to be done when later on down the line. So when you have your plan, structure and cultivate, when it comes to cultivate individual areas, it's easy to do that. So I would say get your windbreaks in, kind of work out what you want to go on where. So you have your perennial veg area, you've got your propagation area, you have your greenhouse area, your polytunnel, the coffee in the morning area, your cocktails in the evening area, a seating area for barbecues, whatever it is. You kind of figure out the different areas and then use paths to divide, to access and divide up those areas. So I'll add that actually, because that's good. Paths and areas. And then for the canopy, again, going back to the design side of it, choose the right. Always choose the right. Choose the right size tree for the particular spot that you've got, so you know how tall the tree will get and what the diameter of the canopy will be. And it's always use, like, always have a windbreak. If it's not protected already, you need to add some protection for your young trees. The spacing is the critical thing when you're planting your trees, because when you're creating a forest garden, you're creating its edge of woodland is what the conditions you're trying to emulate. So you want to have gaps between. You don't want to have trees rammed up against each other, because they'll no light will come through, and then it's a lot of bother to keep pruning things to allow light to come through. So plant for the final size and choose the right size plant for that situation, the right size tree for that situation. And yeah, there's a very handy. Oh no, I haven't got it. Oh dear. Oh no, mud. Walcott Nursery. There's a handy guide to different rootstocks, which is I'll add this Walcott Nursery rootstocks. I'll add this on. I'll add this onto the notes as well. And I kind of keep it simple. There's loads of different rootstocks. So rootstock is where you have. Okay, in your own time. Walcott Nursery. Okay, it's not going to do it. I won't bother. A rootstock determines the height and vigor of a fruit tree. So all pretty much all fruit trees are grafted, so they kind of maintain the characteristics. So they're clones, and then they're grafted onto a rootstock, and that rootstock determines how wide and how tall and how vigorous the tree is. And yeah, so choose the right rootstock. You can get quite complicated with which rootstock, but I've limited it to about 4 different rootstocks now. And then pollinating partners. Always make sure most fruit trees require a pollinating partner. Even if they're self-fertile, they do better if there's another tree nearby, and that it's in the same, that it flowers at the same time as well. And you can check out all this information on Orange Pippin fruit reference. And what I would say is when you're doing your plans and your designs and figuring out where to put your trees and how much space is between them, that you want to leave a quarter to a half of the average diameter as a gap in between. Always go out into the garden and check that you've got the right sizes. So do it on the plan, fine, it makes it easier, but always go outside and measure up twice. Yeah, measure twice, plant once, so it saves you having to move the tree later on. There are a whole load of species. I'm not really going to go, I haven't got time to go through them now, but I have a forest garden spreadsheet, which is again on the notes here, forest garden spreadsheet. And that lists all the books in Martin Crawford's. It lists all the trees in Martin Crawford's book, Creating a Forest Garden. So that spreadsheet is kind of really handy reference, and it's fruit trees, nut trees, all sorts of trees in there. And it's also got a tree book as well, which is I won't show Martin Crawford's trees. Where are you? Trees. So I'll get it for you. So that's really good as well. That's a very good reference if you want to get kind of detailed. The Creating a Forest Garden is fine enough for most people, but if you want more detail about different cultivars and pests and things, this is a very, very good reference too. And then planting trees. Oh, I haven't even gone into plant. I need to add that, planting trees as well. So when you're planting trees, you generally plant trees in the winter. Well, buy them bare root. Generally, they're cheaper when they're bare root. So buy your trees bare root in the winter. Generally, you plant them in the winter, like late autumn, or better than like late spring. If you plant them in spring, sometimes you can have a very dry spring like we did this year, and then you've got to keep the trees watered. Whereas if you plant them in the winter, they get more of a chance to get established. And yeah, you generally don't need to stake you only need to stake dwarfing fruit trees. So if you've got a larger fruit tree, which will grow, if you have a tree that will grow larger later on, you don't need to stake it. You only stake dwarfing fruit trees, or trees that are really big when you put them in, like over 2 meters, over 1.5 meters, 2 meters, over 2 meters high. You're much better off to plant a young tree than you are a bigger tree, because it will get established just as quickly. I mean, after a couple of years, it would have caught up with a big tree anyway, and will be healthier. So plant young trees, like maiden trees, 1-2 year old trees. So I will add that, planting trees, and dig the hole. There's no need for any kind of soil additives, unless you're no need for any soil additives. No need for any mycorrhizal fungi for the roots. But if your soil is in a decent condition, I will actually put these details in, because it's quite important. And dig a hole which is just big enough for the roots. Don't fluff up a massive great area. Just dig a hole big enough for the roots. There we go. And this is reference. That's Ronnie Barker sitting on some grass mulch underneath a tree. And there's some more links there as well. So hope that's useful. Thank you very much for watching.